Ranger, a German shepherd, lay still on the cold metal table, his tired eyes watching the door, as if waiting for someone he loved. His breathing was slow. His chest rose and fell, like waves getting smaller before the sea becomes quiet. He was an old German shepherd, once strong and full of life. Now, at 14 years old, Ranger was weak, his body tired from the years. The soft lights of Sunny Paws Veterinary Clinic glowed warmly, but the air inside felt heavy and sad. The room was quiet, except for the slow sound of Ranger's breath and the quiet footsteps of Dr. Evans, the vet. She stood beside him, holding a syringe in her hand, the kind used to gently let animals go when their time comes. She didn't want to do it, but she knew Ranger was suffering. Dr. Evans looked down at him with kind eyes. "You were a hero, Ranger," she whispered. "You saved so many lives." On the nearby wall, there was a picture of Ranger in his younger days. He looked proud, standing tall with a bright orange search and rescue vest on his back. Next to him stood a man in a firefighter's uniform, smiling and holding Ranger's leash, Tom, his handler and best friend. For 10 years, Ranger and Tom worked side by side. Fires, floods, earthquakes. They had gone into dangerous places to bring people out alive. Together, they had become more than a team. They were family. But now Ranger was alone. Dr. Evans gently touched his back and whispered again, "It's okay, boy. You can rest now." She lifted the needles slowly, her hands soft and careful. But suddenly, Ranger moved. Though his legs were weak, he lifted his head and let out a deep, powerful howl. It was not a cry of pain. It was a cry of love, of longing. The sound filled the room like music full of sorrow. The receptionist outside stopped typing. The vet assistant dropped her pen. Dr. Evans froze. Chills ran down her arms. Ranger's eyes, tired just moments ago, were now full of feeling. He stared at the door with hope, as if he believed it would open any second. "Tom," Dr. Evans whispered, because this wasn't just a random cry. Ranger was calling for Tom. Even though he was so weak, even though his body was shutting down, his heart still remembered the one person who had always been there for him. But there was a problem. Tom wasn't there. He was miles away, lying in a hospital bed, dying of cancer. The doctors said he didn't have much time left either. Dr. Evans slowly lowered the needle and looked into Ranger's eyes. "No," she whispered, shaking her head gently. "Not yet. He's waiting for someone." And as the room stood still, the only sound was the soft breathing of a dog who refused to say goodbye. Until his person came back, Ranger lay still on the exam table, his eyes still fixed on the door, waiting. His deep howl had slowly faded, but the feeling behind it stayed in the room. He wasn't just calling for anyone, he was calling for Tom. Even though his body trembled and his chest rose with great effort, he didn't give up. His tail didn't move. His legs were too weak. But his heart was still holding on. Miles away in a quiet hospital room, Tom lay in a bed, his body thin and weak. Tubes ran from his arms, and machines beeped beside him. His skin was pale, and his breath came slowly. But his mind was with Ranger. Suddenly, Tom opened his eyes. He had heard something, not with his ears, but in his soul. He turned slowly to the nurse sitting beside him. "Ranger," he whispered. The nurse leaned forward. "What is it, Tom?" Tom's voice was barely a breath. "Is he okay?" The nurse looked unsure. We haven't heard from the vet yet." Just then, the hospital phone rang. It was the call. The vet had called to say Ranger didn't have much time left. Tom gripped the blanket tightly in his hands. Tears formed in his tired eyes. "I need to see him," he whispered. "Please, I can't let him go alone." The nurse's eyes softened. "Tom, you're very sick. You haven't stood in days, I don't think." "I don't care," Tom said, his voice shaking. "He waited for me. I have to be there." Back at the Sunny Paws Clinic, the room was quiet again. Ranger still lay on the table, chest slowly rising and falling. His eyes were still locked on the door. His strength was almost gone. Dr. Evans stood beside him, syringe still in her hand, but she hadn't moved. The receptionist walked in, holding a phone in her hand, her face full of shock. "Dr. Evans," she said, breathless. "It's the hospital. Tom is coming." "What?" Dr. Evans gasped. "He can't even sit up." "They said he's on his way," the receptionist said, voice trembling. "He begged them. He wouldn't stop asking." Dr. Evans looked down at Ranger, whose ears had slightly moved. His eyes still burned with that same hope. "He's holding on for him," she whispered. Back at the hospital, the nurses and doctors gathered quickly. It wasn't easy. They wrapped Tom in thick blankets, carefully lifted him from the bed, and placed him gently on a stretcher. His breathing was short, his body shaking, but his eyes were open and focused. "Hold on, Ranger," he whispered. "I'm coming." An ambulance waited outside, ready to take him to the clinic. As it rolled through the streets, Tom gripped the stretcher's side with all the strength he had left. Each bump in the road sent pain through his body, but he didn't complain. "Just a little longer," he said, voice low. "Wait for me, boy." Back at the clinic, Dr. Evans sat beside Ranger, softly stroking his fur. "He's coming, Ranger," she whispered. "Just hang on." Ranger's breathing slowed again, each breath more fragile than the last. But his eyes never left the door. Ranger's body was weak, almost still, but his eyes remained open, just barely. Each breath he took was slower than the last. It was clear. Time was running out. But somewhere far away, in a speeding ambulance, Tom was fighting just as hard. Wrapped tightly in thick blankets, Tom lay on a stretcher with his eyes wide open. His face was pale, his lips dry, but his heart beat fast with hope. "Is he still there?" Tom asked weakly. The nurse riding beside him nodded, even though she wasn't sure. "Yes, Tom," she said gently. "He's waiting for you." Tom gripped the edge of the blanket with shaking fingers. "He waited for me in earthquakes, in floods. He'll wait now, too." The ambulance hit a bump, and Tom winced in pain, but he didn't complain. He only closed his eyes and whispered, "Please, just let me see him." Back at Sunny Paws Veterinary Clinic, Dr. Evans stood over Ranger. The room was quiet, except for the soft sound of the oxygen machine and the ticking clock on the wall. She placed her hand gently on Ranger's chest. The rise and fall was slow. Too slow. She checked his pulse again. Faint. Very faint. The receptionist peeked in. "The ambulance is 5 minutes away," she said in a soft voice. Dr. Evans looked down at the old German Shepherd. "Just 5 more minutes, Ranger," she whispered. "He's almost here." Ranger's ears gave a tiny twitch. He had heard that. Even on the edge of life, he recognized the name that meant everything. Tom. Outside, the ambulance siren cried through the streets as it rushed through traffic. Cars moved out of the way, and the driver didn't slow down for a second. Inside, Tom's eyes fluttered. He was exhausted. His body begged to rest, but his soul pulled him forward. "Don't let him go without me," he whispered. Almost there, the nurse said, holding his hand. Meanwhile, in the clinic, Ranger took a shallow breath. Dr. Evans leaned close. "Come on, boy," she said gently. "He needs you too." Ranger's tail gave a tiny twitch. His eyes, still open, stared at the clinic door. As weak as he was, his heart still remembered every mission with Tom, every moment they'd shared. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by the sharp sound of ambulance brakes screeching to a halt outside. The receptionist rushed to the front window. "They're here," she shouted. In seconds, the clinic door flew open. The cold air rushed in as two nurses wheeled in Tom, wrapped in blankets, his face pale but eyes wide and full of tears. Dr. Evans stepped back, covering her mouth with her hand. Tom saw Ranger, and Ranger saw him. Ranger's eyes lit up, just a little. His head moved weakly, and a sound escaped his throat, a low, gentle whine. Tom tried to lift his hand. It trembled, but he reached out. "Ranger," he whispered. And Ranger tried to move too. His front paw twitched forward, his nose barely lifting, as he took in the familiar scent, the one he had loved his whole life. Tears filled everyone's eyes. No one spoke. No one moved. It was a moment that felt frozen in time. Two souls who had shared life and death, finally reunited. The room was silent as Tom was wheeled in. His face was pale, his lips dry, and his body weak from the pain and sickness that had been eating away at him. But the moment his eyes found Ranger lying on the exam table, something changed. A spark returned to his face. "Hey, buddy," Tom whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. The nurse pushed his stretcher closer to the table where Ranger lay. The dog's body was still, but the moment he heard that familiar voice, the one he had trusted his whole life, his ears twitched slightly. Then, with great effort, Ranger lifted his head. Dr. Evans stepped back, her eyes full of tears. Everyone in the room knew they were witnessing something special, a goodbye filled with more love than words could carry. Tom reached out his thin, shaking hand. It took all his strength, but he stretched it far enough to touch Ranger's fur. Ranger let out a soft breath, almost a sigh of relief. His tail moved weakly, a tiny wag that said more than any bark ever could. "You did good, boy," Tom whispered, his voice cracking. "You saved so many lives, including mine." He rested his hand on Ranger's head gently. "You can rest now." Ranger closed his eyes slowly. He pressed his nose one last time into Tom's palm, his favorite place in the world. Dr. Evans watched closely as Ranger took one final deep breath. Then his body grew still. No more rising chest, no more soft breathing, no more heartbeat. "Ranger's gone," the vet whispered, her voice soft and full of sorrow. But then a sudden stillness came over Tom. His hand, still touching Ranger's fur, went limp. The monitor beside his stretcher began to beep faster, then slower. Then nothing. A flat line. The nurse leaned forward in shock. "Doctor, he's gone too." Dr. Evans covered her mouth, tears falling freely now. Tom had held on with everything he had, just to say goodbye. And now that Ranger was at peace, so was he. The room remained still for a long time. No one rushed to clean. No one moved the bodies. Everyone simply stood there, honoring the bond between a man and his dog, a firefighter and his loyal partner side by side, even in their final moments. One of the younger assistants wiped her eyes and whispered, "They didn't want to leave each other." "They didn't?" said Dr. Evans quietly. "They went together, just like they lived." The clinic's soft lights glowed warmly over them. Ranger's head rested near Tom's hand, as if they were simply taking a nap after another long mission. The peace on their faces said it all. There was no pain now, only love. Outside the clinic window, the wind moved gently through the trees. Somewhere far beyond the clouds, maybe they were already running together, free of pain, full of joy, side by side once again. The news spread like wildfire through the town and beyond. A firefighter and his loyal dog passed away together. People couldn't believe it. They read the headlines, watched the news, and shared the story on their phones. But more than just news, it became a story of love and loyalty that touched hearts everywhere. Tom and Ranger had been heroes, known for saving lives during floods, earthquakes, and fires. Now, even in death, they had become a symbol of something greater, unbreakable friendship. At the fire station, the flag was lowered to half-mast. Firefighters stood in silence, many with tears in their eyes. Some held their helmets to their chests. Others whispered quiet prayers. "He loved that dog more than anything," said one firefighter. "And that dog never left his side," said another. Tom's funeral was held a few days later. It was a clear day, with soft clouds in the sky and a gentle breeze blowing through the trees. Hundreds of people came. Some were firefighters wearing their uniforms. Some were families Tom had helped during rescue missions. Others were strangers who had read about Tom and Ranger and wanted to pay their respects. Even dogs came. Many people brought their own dogs to the service. Big dogs, small dogs, rescue dogs, all sat quietly beside their humans. It felt right. After all, this was a goodbye for one of their own. The most touching part came after the speeches. A statue was unveiled outside the fire station. It showed Tom kneeling beside Ranger, one hand resting gently on the dog's back. Ranger's eyes were looking up at him with complete trust. They looked like they were ready for their next mission. Together, forever. The plaque below the statue read, "In memory of Tom and Ranger, loyal partners in life and beyond." People began to leave flowers, handwritten notes, and dog toys at the base of the statue. Some children placed drawings of dogs and firefighters. One little girl left a red ball and a note that said, "Thank you for saving my dad in the flood. Ranger, I hope you're chasing this ball in heaven." Another note read, "Some bonds never break, not even in death." It became a place of peace. People came not just to remember, but to feel hope, to believe in love, loyalty, and kindness. Back in the clinic, Dr. Evans placed a photo of Tom and Ranger on the wall with a small caption. "Heroes never truly leave. They just move on to a place where they can rest." And somewhere, far beyond clouds, past the pain of sickness and the weight of old age, a man and his dog ran freely again. Tom's legs were strong now. There was no more cancer, no more weakness. Ranger's fur shined like it used to, and his tail wagged with excitement. They ran side by side through golden fields, chasing butterflies, barking joyfully, never needing to say goodbye again. Because love like theirs doesn't end. It only continues. In memories, in stories, in the hearts they touched, and in a heaven where a firefighter and his best friend are together forever.